Hey guys, I hope you had a great weekend. We are going to be starting amphibians this week. Kind of the same thing that we did last week, so we'll have um, the notes, which I'm going to go over here quick. Your Minnesota amphibians to learn. We'll have an ID quiz on that later next week. You'll have a pretty easy frogs and toads article. It's pretty easy. And then you're going to have a amphibian and reptiles field guide is going to be together. So that'll be due, well, it says today, but I'm going to change that to next week. So that'll be due probably at the end of next week. Okay, so don't worry, but it's the same process as your thing. Okay, so let's go through some characteristics of amphibians and some of the different groups of amphibians. And we'll talk a little bit about which ones are in Minnesota and which ones are not. So, alright, so our amphibians are going to be frogs and toads. We have salamanders, and then these are called caecilians, and we don't have those in Minnesota. So you've probably never seen one of those before. So looking at our phylogenetic tree, or our kind of how different traits have evolved, remember we've got our vertebrae down at the bottom, which is just a bony skeleton. All of these things, our fish, our ray-finned fish, and have a bony skeleton. Sharks do not. Remember, theirs is made out of cartilage. We've got four limbs from amphibians on, so these four limbs kind of are the characteristics of everything beyond that point. The amniotic egg, we'll talk about that when we get to reptiles, so don't worry too much about that. Hair for primates, basically mammals, and then we've got reptiles up here. So this is how some scientists believe that different traits have evolved and different organisms have evolved over time, over millions of years. So some characteristics of amphibians. They're vertebrates, they're cold-blooded, so they're ectothermic, which means that they don't have their own metabolism like we do. They need to get warmth from the environment. So you'll see them sometimes sitting in the sun just to get some energy and warmth. They have a permeable skin that's thin. Blood vessels are close to the surface, so that some of them can actually breathe through their skin, so oxygen can diffuse in and out through those blood vessels. They have poison glands, and all of them do, although not all of them are poisonous to us. There's no scales, feathers, or hair. They need water for reproduction, so even though they are the first land animals, they need to go back to the water for reproduction, and a lot of them actually live near water most of the time anyway, because they don't want their thin skin to dry out. It's external or internal fertilization, so the females can lay eggs in the water where the males fertilize it externally. Sometimes they'll have internal fertilization, but most of them have fertilization just like a fish. The eggs will hatch, young begin to develop, and they do that in the water. Here's some different frog eggs over here. Many eggs are laid at a time. Some of them protect them from predators, and others do not. So it really kind of depends on the species. This is a tadpole, basically, that's almost done metamorphosing into a frog. And here is a salamander metamorphosis. Here's a cute little tadpole. So this is just the metamorphosis of the frog. So eggs will hatch into tadpoles, so they have a tail and gills. They grow larger as they feed on plants. They start metamorphosis and start to grow hind limbs first, so here's that. They start getting bigger, get pairs of limbs. The gills disappear and the lungs are developed. And then the frog can crawl onto land. They lose their tail, or it's reabsorbed, continues to grow until it becomes an adult. So this is the metamorphosis of, or the changing of, a frog from a tadpole to an adult. So some of the diversity, different groups. We have anurans, which are toads and frogs. They're tailless. They're on all continents but Antarctica. They have long legs but no tail. And there are distinct larval stages. So just like I showed you, they metamorphosize, I don't know if that's a word, into, or from a tadpole into the adult. Here's a toad. Here's a frog. I've been hearing a lot of frogs and toads chirping at night, which is pretty cool. So what's the difference between a frog and a toad? Frogs are usually found near water. They have really long legs, hind legs. They jump a lot farther than a toad does. They're usually kind of skinnier. They'll lay their eggs in clusters, and then their skin is thin and smooth. And usually it's a little more colorful. They also have like a ridge, I think, on their back. A lot of them have this kind of ridge on their back. Toads are dry-skinned. They have bumpy skin, and they're usually brown. They lay their eggs in a chain, shorter hind legs. They usually have small hops, and then they're usually kind of fat or chubbier. And they can be found on land, further from water. A lot of times you'll see them like in little holes or buried in the dirt, and that's where they like to be. The Caudata family are newts and salamanders. So here's a little newt, here's a salamander. A lot of people call salamanders sallies. I have only seen one in the wild, which is kind of funny. My sister's planter fell over, and when I reached to pick it up, there was a big salamander under there. It was really cool. They're mostly in the northern hemisphere in almost every habitat, but usually you'll find them in the woods, and they hide under stuff, so they're hard to find a lot of times. Most of them will have internal fertilization and direct development, so they don't lay as many eggs as, say, a frog or a toad would. Here's the tiniest little newt. You can see how small it is there. Here's some newts of the world. They're not as common as at least not in Minnesota, as salamanders are. I think we have eastern newts. The Sicilians are limbless, so there's no legs. They live in tropical habitats, so usually in like rainforest areas. They burrow into the ground, and since they live underground, there's a skin flap that covers their eyes, which makes them blind. For some reason, over time, it was an advantage to not be able to see, or it didn't matter that they couldn't see, so they are blind. Their lungs are reduced in size. They have internal fertilization as well, and some of them will care for their young. To me, they look like worms, but they're not worms. They're Sicilians. So why ecologically are amphibians important? Like we said, they all have poison glands, so some of those poisons, quote unquote poisons, actually could be beneficial for certain medications, or converted into different medications. They're indicators of environmental health, so they're what we call a keystone species, where they, if there's a thriving amphibian population, generally that means that it's a thriving, healthy environment. They help control insects. They're vital in food webs. They, as adults, most of them will eat insects. So there is that, but they're also important prey for a lot of other animals as well. They have roles in the nutrient cycles, cultures and religions, depending on, what culture they have their symbols of different things, so that's kind of interesting. But the number of species of amphibians are declining. They're going down because, mostly because of habitat loss. Here's the pest control. I think this is pretty cool. Look at how long his tongue is. Here are some cultural Princess and the Frog. I don't know if you guys eat honey smacks or have read Wind in the Willows when you were younger. Kermit the Frog. I think this guy is on Looney Tunes. Some medicines. So this guy has a poison on him that can, which is called epibetadine. That's a pain control. So they're looking into making a medication for that. This guy is has a cardiac stimulant for the heart. And if you guys go back, if you can go to the zoo this summer, they have poison dart frogs actually in the little rainforest area that's inside. And the poison dart frogs, sometimes when I'm there, they'll just be like running around, but they only have their poisons from what they eat, if they eat certain things. So they weren't poisonous, but because they hadn't had that toxin that they were eating. This guy has a chemical on him, common Indian toad, that's used as a sleep aid. Oh, look at how cute he is. This is used for, he has got a chemical that can be used to treat depression, strokes, seizures, and Alzheimer's. So lots of different possibilities. This guy, the African clawed frog, used for, I don't know how this would work, but they have an antibiotic, and he actually has something, they have something that kills skin cancer cells. So 43% of our amphibian species are in decline, again because of habitats. Some of them are very susceptible to different pesticides or environmental toxins. Sometimes there's competition between alien invasive species, some diseases. Overexploitation would be like keeping them for pets or exotic pet kind of thing. It is believed that there are 120 species of amphibians that are extinct, which if you go back to those medication slides, that could mean that, we could have possibly cured or helped things that we don't even know about anymore. So that is it. I hope you guys are doing good. I miss you all, and I hope you have a great day.